Well, also joining this panel from New Delhi is the convener of the Foreign Affairs Cell of the Bharatiya Janata Party, Seshadri Chari. Mr. Chari, welcome, and good evening to you from Washington. Dr. Stephen Cohen, not that, I want to start by taking off on what former Foreign Minister Salman Khurshid said in that comment in the part of that news report where Americans like to talk specific issues and they don't like big talk. They like to see action. In your views, there's been enough talk from Narendra Modi so far. How are you viewing this visit? I mean, has it now got to move into the next phase?
Well, I'm waiting to see who he's going to appoint as defense minister, or as an acting defense minister now, and because much of the relationship is going to function around weapons purchases and modernization of the Indian military. And without that, I think that India is going to go nowhere. He has to have a serious person who knows about defense matters as his full-time defense minister.
So you say the entire core issue right now is on the area of defense cooperation?
No, it's one of the critical building blocks. The economic investment will take its natural course as India opens up. Ron Summers can talk about that. There'll be more American interest in India. But in terms of one particular sector, the defense relationship, because that involves foreign policy. If we sell India X kind of weapon, what is that weapon going to be used for? Will they have confidence that we're going to supply spare parts? So that's a deeper relationship.
What about technology transfer?
And that applies to technology also. If we sell the Javelin technology, who are they going to use the Javelin against? And will we supply spare parts in a crisis, say, with Pakistan? I don't know. These are the issues.
But are you then saying that Americans expect India's foreign policy to be guided by its defense cooperation with America to some extent?
It's a critical element of it, but not guided. The overall strategic relationship is going to be economic, cultural, diplomatic, and political. But there's a military component as well.
But then Indian interests would also be hinged to that, Dr. Cohen. We would also expect that as the countries which you are supplying so much defense weapons to, and I think America is now the biggest defense supplier to India, that we would also ask in turn that you reset your relationship with Pakistan.
That's right. I
and
agree.
Look more at the Indian interests.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that dialogue has happened yet. Partly because
Why?
Partly because we're distracted. I think America has been, sees South Asia as flyover country. We're interested in the Middle East. We're interested in East Asia. So the pivot brought us from the Middle East to East Asia. But in fact, that meant it looking the other way when it came to India.
This is very interesting, Ambassador.
I don't entirely agree with Dr. Cohen, so I'd like to argue with him a bit.
Yeah, please do.
First of all, to go back to where you started, talk versus action. Yes, Americans are famously drawn to the concrete, but I think there's a lot of conceptual conversation that needs to happen. And the important thing to remember is that over the past 15 years, India and the United States have been on kind of a voyage of discovery and have discovered a lot of areas where their interests, in fact, do coincide. Pakistan is still a problem area, although there are even some aspects there where our ultimate goals are very similar. But if you look at Indian Ocean security, East Asia security, the prosperity of the whole Asian region, basically going from India on east, you've got a tremendous overlap in interests. And for that reason, I think this whole concern about anybody guiding anybody else's foreign policy is probably a little bit overdrawn. I can understand it on a historical basis. And it is true that the U.S. is accustomed to dealing with weaker powers. And so the U.S. has some learning to do about how to manage a relationship with a country like India. But I think the U.S. is looking for a real relationship, not just for somebody who will cheerfully be led around by the nose, since that clearly is not a description that would ever be suitable for India.
No, I think both of you have made very solid and if I may say contrary points from where you stand, and I find this very, very interesting. I'd only, Ambassador, like to point out that India has consistently had its own independent foreign policy, and we've taken contrary positions vis-a-vis America in international forums. We've also taken contrarian positions vis-a-vis Russia in international forums, and there is a genuine worry among some sections in India that we would like to have a relationship as equals with America, but none of the other issues which we have should not make us sort of a cheerleader of the Americans. That I don't think is going to happen.
I think this is something that we're basically going to have to learn how to do. In theory, everybody agrees. And I can't think of any American official who deals seriously with India that expects India to give up its independent foreign policy. Nobody.
Yes.
But then how do you do this in practice?
Yeah. Yes. I agree with Ambassador Schaffer. If you go back 10, 15 years, the relationship is totally different. It's much better. It's more normal.
Yes.
But if you had tomorrow a conflict with Pakistan, which is entirely possible, a conflict with China, where would the Americans come down? I don't know. Would we back India? Would we not back India? I'm not quite sure what we do. I don't think the Indian government does either. So you can't be non-aligned on all issues. In a sense, there has to be some convergence on policy.
If I may say so, Pakistan is a problem that both of us share.
That's right.
When we look at issues of convergence that bring us together, may I propose that Pakistan should also be one of those issues which bring us together?
That with China is a problem. The Chinese have much the same problem.
Yes, they do. Now, these two gentlemen on both sides of the table also raised their hands very gently as both of you were speaking. Who goes first? Ron.
Could I say, I think already a success. My goodness.
The Modi visit.
We were in New York together on Saturday. Think of how the day began at the 9/11 memorial, an expression of solidarity on the issue of terrorism, an extraordinary speech before the United Nations, where he basically put Nawaz Sharif right in his place in the sense, how can you talk about terrorism when you're still harboring the camps, when in fact 9/11 you were harboring Osama bin Laden, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, the whole hypocrisy of that. Then the speech last night at Madison Square Garden, he has catalyzed the Indian-American community of 3 million people like never before, and I would say I've not seen this level of enthusiasm since the U.S.-India civil nuclear deal announced in 2005. This is an extraordinary opportunity now as he meets the U.S. CEOs, as he did this morning for breakfast, as he goes into the Obama meeting, where he's able to really carry with him 3 million Americans of Indian origin.
You think that makes an impact?
Oh, sure. 3 million Americans.
They're not a politically mobilized group. They're not a politically mobilized group, are they? What do you think?
They're very
starting to be. They're starting to be. Now, they've been mobilized on both sides of the political fence, which makes it interesting. The BJP apparatus in the United States tends to be more Republican. There are other parts of the Indian American community that tend to be more Democratic, but it's not a constituency that has a political direction.
So do you think, Ambassador, that with that kind of a backing among the 3 million Indian American, that gives Modi more clout or adds to it, makes any difference at all?
Tiny bit.
Tiny bit.
Tiny bit. It's nothing significant. It's something that American politicians will cater to because they want the contributions from Indian Americans, but it's not a major factor.
Yeah. So Maroof, interesting how Dr. Stephen Cohen began this. He said, I want to know who your defense minister is going to be, because the only critical issue between both the countries, or the critical issue, will be defense. And he's probably right, because by some conservative estimates, India will spend $80 to $100 billion on defense in the next decade, which means the kind of money that America has made with India, which is about $8-9 million, I think, since billion dollars,
more than
since 2008. Yeah. The Americans will be slurping at the opportunity of $50 billion of business with India. But, that also gives us so much more headroom to have a serious conversation on our issues with the Americans. How are we going to do that?
I mean, all the panelists here are far more distinguished than I am. But, if I can sort of take off on some of the points they've made, I think the most important thing is, for India, an independent foreign policy is an article of faith.
Yeah.
And if you have to deal with India, you have to deal, in as much if you deal with Pakistan like you deal with Pakistan, you have to deal with their obsession about Kashmir. And you have to factor that in. That will keep coming up in their conversations. So India's independence of foreign policy, foreign policy to me and to many of us in India is not about being either you're with us or against us. I think generally we are with the United States, but there are issues. For instance, Iran, we have 14 to 17% oil dependence on Iran. You may have shale gas, we don't have shale gas. So we have to keep building up on that dependence. Look at the defense partnership. I think the point Professor Cohen was making was that's one area in which there have been huge steps taken as against in the other issues in the strategic relationship. And therefore it is very important to have, and I think Professor Cohen is not the only one who says that. There are any number of op-eds that have come out in Indian newspapers that say that we need an attentive full-time defense minister, more so in the Indian context, context where we have a bureaucracy which is fumbling along. I mean, you talk, Arnab, of Indo-US military joint exercises. I've spoken to US officials, and they're exasperated with the bureaucracy which doesn't know the front of a rifle from a rear, but is calling all the shots in this whole military relationship. And likewise, I think there are two other issues that you may like to ask the distinguished panel here. That, we talk of CEO relationship and high teas with CEO, but the CEOs are too distracted to look at India. They have to have a points person. You have to have an India desk in the companies, which will then build up the relationship with India, because you can't have the head of Boeing focusing on India only when India may have a 27% growth rate in its aerospace market, but there are other things Boeing has to look at. So I think there is that one issue, and the second...
let's look at broader issues. I wanted to pick up the issue of trust between these two countries on this conversation.
If I may just strengthen your point, and that is the trust between the two countries will come only when you appreciate that we've been hammered by cross-border terror attacks for 3 decades or more, and we cannot have this acceptance in America that we need Pakistan till we are in Afghanistan and then we look at your case.
Ambassador,
you can't have it that way.
This is a genuine concern, because people in India who are watching Obama's speech at the UNGA made 2 observations. One, they said he's looking increasingly helpless, like he got the calculation entirely wrong vis-a-vis the ISIS. The other concern they had was that, why is he not talking significantly longer about the Al-Qaeda? Just because his attention is now moved, Professor Cohen, his attention, Professor Cohen, is therefore moved to ISIS. What happens to the Al-Qaeda? What happens to the Haqqani network? What happens in the region? As America moves away, is it fair to worry about the fact that America leaves its problems behind and doesn't look to resolving?
I think that's a legitimate concern, and we've not taken India that seriously until the Mumbai attacks. Then because Americans went
2008, yeah.
And in a sense, that's what brought us back to the region. But again, there's a tendency to deal with the most critical issue first and only. As for verification, trusting, it has to be verification. I worked for Ronald Reagan, who said trust but verify. So a lot of our agreements and understandings are the Indians want trust, but we want verification. We want to see Indians do specific things that will work. And I'd say the Indian defense establishment is one. Why is India buying billions of dollars of weapons from abroad? Because it can't make it itself. That's where we should be helping India manufacture and sell these things on the open market commercially.
But the relationship did sink, did it not? I mean, the relationship got vitiated. And
let me trace the history. Very thin relationship throughout the Cold War years. We basically didn't have much to say to one another. Remarkable transformation, which I would sort of start from 2000, although some bases were laid before that, yes. And the Clintons' epic visit to India. High point, 2005 to 9, the years during which the nuclear deal was negotiated. And that was a remarkable exercise, unlike any other negotiation in U.S.-India history. And then everybody kind of exhausted themselves on that negotiation, and both sides lost focus. It was probably more obvious on the U.S. side because you had a crisis sitting right next door in Pakistan. But India-U.S. relations don't do well on lack of attention. It's a high-maintenance relationship. And so the low point was after the Devyani Khobragade episode. And we're clearly coming back from that. You don't have to deal with ill will. You have to deal with some unhappiness on the business side, and I think Ron can talk more eloquently about that. Yes. And that is genuinely unhappiness. But there isn't any ill will, of which there was some during the Cold War years.
May I just...
So you have to... The question is, how do you turn what is essentially a passively benign environment into one that's more actively engaged?
Just 2 small points, if I may say, of slight disagreement with you. I don't feel Devyani was the lowest point in the relationship. I feel if you ask a lot of Indians, they'll find the snooping controversy the lowest point in the relationship. When despite, we signed an MOU to promote closer cooperation on cybersecurity, a timely exchange of information between organizations of respective countries responsible for cybersecurity. Instead, what we got was snooping into Indian systems, revelations that Indian embassies were being snooped upon. The BJP was also under surveillance. And when asked about this whole issue, John Kerry in New Delhi gave some kind of a template response. So that actually, at a government-to-government level, that was another low point.
No, America snoops on everybody.
No.
I mean, the Germans, they snoop on all their friends and allies, so it's not just us.
Well, you know,
what I would say,
Maroof, at the end of the day, that we are talking about mistrust.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I don't think it's adding to the level of trust between two large and mature nations to come together.
I think that when you're talking about the U.S. and India, in the first instance, you're going to see trust created issue by issue rather than across the board. I would like it to be different, but I don't think it will be different.
Yes. I also now want to go across to one critical issue of where
the greatest trust builder in the past 20 years was the
business.
Business, but I'm talking about at the high levels of government. When President Clinton called Vajpayee during the Kargil episode.
Yeah. I think that.
No, I'm not suggesting that we have a crisis so you can have a phone call every few weeks. That's not a good idea.
I think Clinton's intervention at the time of the Kargil crisis, and I think that, you know, when Nawaz Sharif was in Blair House, that conversation, I think, will go down in history as a very critical moment. Before I go on, and many of our viewers, Dr. Cohen, want to get a view from you and others on where America sees the strategic relationship vis-a-vis India, whether it is going to be a utilitarian relationship vis-a-vis China, whether there can be some quadrangular understanding between Australia, Japan, India, and the United States, whether it's necessary at all or not. From a world order overview, I'd like to get your sense on that. But before that, may I go across to Seshadri Chari, who's been patiently waiting. First of all, apologies to keep you waiting. I wanted to get the discussion started here and then engage you in it. Mr. Chari, Mr. Modi will be speaking at the Council for Foreign Relations in about 25 minutes from now. Do you think he'll send out a message at that CFR speech, which will then be the basis on which he will take his discussions in Washington forward? Mr. Chari, over to you.
I think he has already set the tone and tenor of the idea of India's foreign policy relationship with the US and the rest of the country as far as his UN General Assembly speech is concerned. I think what we used to discuss vis-a-vis India-Pakistan relationship or India-China relationship or India-Japan relationship holds equally well for Indo-US relationship also. It's very necessary and very important for the State Department in Washington DC to understand that the new regime in India is different, very different from the earlier ones. Although we always say, I agree with Maroof when he said that foreign policy doesn't change with the change of government, but our response mechanism will change, number one. Number two, I think when the US talks of partnership, strategic partnership, they should also know that what they mean by strategic partnership need not necessarily be what we understand by strategic partnership. There has been a trust deficit between the US and India for a long time. After 2009, after the Indo-US nuclear deal, nothing went ahead, not because India did not want that to go ahead, that because some of the main important companies which were supposed to be supplying us material were all taken over by the Japanese. Even White Westinghouse has been taken over by the Japanese. So unless Indo-Japan nuclear deal takes place, Indo-US nuclear deal cannot progress as much as they want that to progress. So all these economic aspects are now becoming more and more interlinked. So Indo-US relationship is also going to hinge on Indo-China relationship and Indo-Japan relationship. And like we have relationship between Japan and China, in spite of the problems that they have been investing in one another's economy for a long time. Similarly, we need Chinese investment in India for at least continuously for another 10 years. This has to happen, and for that we will have to not only recalibrate our foreign policy but also our economic policy, and that is exactly what Modi has laid out right from his 15th August speech to now. He has been saying that But here I must mention one thing. I think there needs to be a greater realization in Washington on India's problems with Pakistan. I think the US will have to reassess their Pakistan policy and stop bracketing India with Pakistan. Pakistan is no match for India, neither economically nor militarily. Therefore, US will have to recalibrate their policy vis-a-vis Pakistan and India. They have a huge problem in Afghanistan, and when they are withdrawing from Afghanistan, they require Pakistan to a very large extent. But just because US has a problem in Afghanistan, we cannot be tolerating what Pakistan is doing to India for a longer time. And terrorism also affects our economic calculations. And this is exactly what the US should realize and important. And they cannot go away easily saying that good Taliban and bad Taliban. That Modi has already explained. Taliban is the creation of the US. USIS is the creation of the US. So they must realize all these facts. And they must have a global understanding as far as tackling terrorism is concerned. But as far as the economic policies are concerned, as far as trust deficit is concerned, Modi has already started working on it. He has already relaxed the visa regime for some of the US issues. Now it is for the US to relax some of the visa regimes on their side. So it's going to be working out on a mutual trust building and confidence building measures. Confidence building measures we usually talk in with
and Ambassador Schaffer both to respond to you, Mr. Chari. Yeah, let's get our participants here to quickly respond to, I think, 3 or 4 critical points. And Professor Stephen Cohen, would you like to just respond to Seshadri Chari? Because that is the BJP point of view. He makes 3 points, and I just summarize that. One, he says, China, don't expect us to not have a strong economic relationship with them. Don't hinge our relationship with you to anything with China. Secondly, he raised the issue of terrorism. And third, he says, on Pakistan, you have the leverage. We don't. You have more leverage with Pakistan because you provide them hundreds of millions of dollars of military and civilian assistance. Please, sir.
I think Mr. Chari should come to Washington to talk to us because that's not the way I see it at all. I see the China relationship as one of India hedging against rising Chinese power, as are the Americans. In the case of Pakistan, it's clear that Pakistan is a provocation, but I don't see India doing anything about it.
India not doing anything about it means what?
That it's sort of passively waiting out Pakistan. And that seems to be the Modi policy. That is, we'll wait until they change. So it's a pally-up syndrome. You go first, and of course the Pakistan.
I don't think so, but he actually invited them for a dialogue.
Well, there hasn't come. I mean, the dialogue isn't materializing.
Wait, that's because of the Pakistanis. You don't blame them?
I blame them, but also the Indians are responsible.
What more can he do? What more can India do than offer a dialogue and tell the Pakistanis speak to us and don't speak to a group of separatists? I mean, Professor, would the American government, talk to a group of people who haven't even participated in local city corporation elections and then say that represents the will of the people?
They've admitted that was a mistake.
So you're saying move on? So you're saying move on. Okay, on your response on that, I want Seshadri Chari. I saw him raise his hand there. Yes, I want to. He wants to rebut you. Go ahead, sir.
Said it was a mistake.
On this point, Arnab, on this point, let me tell. We have accommodated Washington to such an extent that when they had problems in Afghanistan, they wanted India to keep the Indo-Pakistan border trouble-free. We have kept the Indo-Pakistan border trouble-free for more than 10 years. 10 years. In spite of the highest provocation, an attack on Indian Parliament, an attack in Bombay, and a continuous series of bomb blasts in India, in spite of that, we did not do. We have obliged the US State Department and the defense establishment to such an extent that we kept our western border free of
Mr. Schaffer wants to come in. He's saying, Seshadri Chari says we've done enough. Don't expect us to be do more than this or be more flexible than this.
Our Afghan policy was a catastrophe. We should have had India in there much earlier. We couldn't make up our mind on that.
Well, again, why? Because of Pakistan.
I think
because
I agree, but we're divided over that.
So the problem is Ambassador Schaffer.
I think Mr. Chari is not so much interested in what we think might have been done differently, but in how the governments relate to each other. On China, I think the United States accepts that India is going to have an important relationship with China, and in many respects, that's complementary to the way we would like to see East Asia evolve, where the United States and other countries, including India, have big relationships with the other big powers in the region, so that China isn't the only large power on the block, so to speak. On Pakistan, we've always had problems on this issue, and I think realistically that we will continue to do so. We have, in the United States, actually a very difficult relationship with Pakistan at the moment. It's slightly better than it was 2 years ago, but that's not saying very much. So I think you have to look on this not as an easy case for the United States, but one where the U.S. Has considerable difficulty.
Ron. Seshadri Chari, you provoke quite a conversation here. Ron Summers also responding, I presume, to some of the points which you raised out there. Maroof, sorry, I'm going to come to you after that.
Let us put it in perspective. The Prime Minister has to be here in Washington, D.C. and in New York this morning, mobilizing massive amounts of investment to come into the Indian economy. By far, the United States companies are the largest investors into India, and we want to be looking at India as a long-term commitment. I think that the Prime Minister clearly can distinguish the difference between U.S. government policy and private sector corporate policy. Ajay Banga this morning talked about the need to build trust. That really means building confidence. When you think of Japan promising $35 billion in investment and President Xi talking about $15 billion, the United States is far exceeding that. And so now the question is, how do we mobilize a new sense of confidence in this new Prime Minister, in this new India, where American companies come into India in a very, very big way? That's got to be the goal today. And therefore, I'm just hopeful that we can bring the conversation back to why business has to be the motivator.
But business is also about defense. And as Ambassador Cohen, straight at the start, he said,
business is about defense. 10 years ago, we were $0, essentially $0 into a defense trade. Today, we're exceeding $10 billion, and we're growing by the hour.
Yeah, but Professor Cohen's point is also well timed. Ambassador Schaffer wanted to come in. Yes, go ahead, Ambassador Schaffer. Maroof after that. Yeah.
In many respects, the most important thing that will set the tone for U.S.-India relations is going to be how well the Indian economy does. But there's a disconnect here. When Americans, and here I'm talking both about government and about business, try to guess what kind of track the Indian economy is on for the next few years, they look at big government policies. I think that Mr. Modi is more interested in projects than in policies. You can do both, but it means that to some extent they're talking about different things.
He talks about, Ambassador, he talks about projects when he speaks because there is a straight connect to the people, but I don't think that can be taken as a presumption that behind it isn't a solid policy.
Well, but that's where the payoff is going to be.
That's where the payoff is going to be. Maroof, please. Yes, Maroof.
3 quick points. One is that Mr. Modi, if you heard his speech at Madison Square Gardens, he said projects lead to implementation of policy. So there is one. The second point which I wish to make is America has to very soon make a choice in this strategic partnership to what extent it wants to walk with India and let Pakistan tag along or abandon it, because that, to me, is the biggest baggage you carry. The third point is that China is watching very closely how far India and the US develop this relationship. Yes. If America wants to reap the dividends of its Look Asia policy or rebalancing of forces, it has to give a greater signal to China.
And India's kept all its options fairly open.
Finally, my last point. US-India relationship is going to be all about long-term persistence and patience. Yeah. You don't have the patience.
That's exactly right.
Yes, you don't have the patience to be with India in this, then you'll not be able to walk your talk.
No, absolutely. Now we are about 14 to 15 minutes from Modi's speech. I would urge all our viewers to stay tuned because we're not taking any breaks till then. But Professor Cohen, see where we have come now. We started with defense and we are back to Pakistan for a substantial reason. The way I draw the link between where you started and the last comment that Maroof made is simply this: that we want to happily do lots of business with you, and we are going to do $100 billion of business. But we also now don't just want the defense trade cooperation agreement to be followed up. We want the US-India defense relationship, the present understanding, I think, ceases in 2015, so it's got to be reset. We want that to become stronger, but you have to make a choice. As in, the Americans must make a choice in the subcontinent, and that choice is not to dump Pakistan, but certainly to be more assertive vis-a-vis Pakistan and not appear to be helpless vis-a-vis Pakistan, which Professor Cohen, frankly, or not. America is not helpless vis-a-vis Pakistan. It may be disengaged, it may be disinterested, but in view that there is a strong India-America relationship possible, if only it makes a clear choice, it will help.
India's interest and America's interest, and actually China's interest, is to have a normal Pakistan, not to see Pakistan go off the rails. Pakistan could tomorrow incinerate India. It has more nuclear weapons than India. They're equal in that sense. They're not equal in any other sense, but in terms of destructive power, they are the same. So we have to be careful in dealing with Pakistan. India, I'd like to see more Indian ideas about how to normalize Pakistan.
No, but where, for example, as America exercised and demanded stronger controls on Pakistan's nuclear proliferation issues, it's been extremely tolerant of that, up to the point which it even made Nawaz Sharif complacent enough to go to the UN Security Council and demand the same status at India.
They've been demanding that for years.
Yeah, but they have been demanding. But
nobody's been listening. But they've been demanding
in a concern area. We all talk about a dirty bomb. We know how unstructured the country is. Recently, a Pakistani naval ship was actually almost taken over by insurgent groups. So it's an unstable country. You're not. Professor Cohen, you're not.
But you sound like the Americans who said, "Let's nuke the Soviets" during the Cold War.
No, certainly
Get
not.
rid of them. Well, how would you deal with Pakistan?
Tougher with Pakistan.
How tough do you want to be? Attack them,
okay. Let me give you. No. One second.
I can see an Reasonable Indian position saying we'll use force against Pakistan.
No.
But then you've got to take the risks.
No. Let me give you a straightforward example of that. You keep extending your $400-500 million
you want
of
us
aid.
to run your Pakistan policy for you.
We would like you, we can't say we want you, but we would like you to clearly draw a link between the military assistance you give to Pakistan and their action on the Lashkar-e-Toiba and the Haqqani network. I don't know how difficult that is and why that should be difficult.
That's coming to an end as our relationship with Pakistan comes to an end.
You think so? Is it going to happen?
I'm pretty sure it is, yeah.
Well, the Pakistani ambassador last week said Hafiz Saeed is a free man. He's the man who organized the Mumbai attack. 6 Americans also died in that.
Pakistani should pay for that, I agree.
But they're not paying for it.
Well, they should be, and that's a fault of American policy. I don't make American policy.
Shouldn't America push them a little bit more?
Well, I think we should. I've written that we have. That's my on the record.
So from an Indian perspective...
I agree with India's policy on that. You're right. So, but on the other hand, it doesn't mean cutting off Pakistan.
But then it's America's fault, isn't it? Obama put India off the radar on those issues. After the nuclear deal.
I agree. I've been saying that for 4 years now. Obama's sort of ignored things.
But can it be a fresh start from there? I mean, clearly,
India
Ambassador, there's been a problem.
Big country with a complicated set of interests and a complicated foreign policy.
Most large countries are.
Yes, you could say the same about the United States. I think you have to be able to deal with the issues as they come up and to create the broader pattern of trust out of the raw materials that you have.
Yeah.
I don't hear Mr. Modi saying that unless the United States effectively cuts off its relationship with Pakistan, India will have nothing to do with it.
No, he's not.
Because he's got other fish to fry. He's got other interests in that game. That's what it means to be the leader of a big and serious country.
Mr. Modi needs to create 1.5 million jobs every month to keep half the population who are under the age of 25 working and growing that economy back to 8, 9, 10% range. In the end, our best antidote of all the issues in the region is deepening the commercial partnership between the United States of America and India.
But understanding on other issues, you see, you want to do business. Let me just give you something more.
And we do that one step at a time.
Yeah, but let me again, let me give you one example. Yes, Ambassador, you wanted to come in.
I would say that Obama lacks a strategic vision for South Asia. He doesn't see anything beyond this immediate visit. I think that's been a problem with this administration. He's obsessed with the Middle East. He's obsessed with East Asia. I don't think South Asia. And whether it's Pakistan or Afghanistan, I think he wants it to go with.
Which, Professor Cohen, is a very interesting point you raised, because as we were, driving up to Washington, and somebody made the observation that, these two gentlemen are at two very different stages of their individual political careers. I mean, actually, Modi is probably 10 years older to Obama. But the fact is that Obama is at the end of his presidency and Modi has just begun, right? And Obama has lot of problems, and Modi, as of now, is still in the honeymoon period. So for two leaders to engage, the fact that they are in two different stages of their political career, will that be an impediment? Would it have been better to speak to a fresh president who has a long presidency ahead of him, not completely distracted with Syria.
But you don't have that fresh presidency with a long presidency.
We can't wait 2 years.
You deal with who you have.
You gotta have, yeah, this is.
And these are both highly intelligent men.
Oh, yes.
Arnab,
yes.
enough diplomats often have said, and we have diplomats here, that foreign policies don't change because of individuals. I mean, however much importance we may attribute to one president or the other.
Yeah.
I think there is a certain consistency in national policy, national interests. America has its own interests, India has its own interests, and I think we just need to understand each other more. We need to talk to each other more. Every American doesn't have the expertise of Professor Cohen and Ambassador Schaffer, because they have really spent time in the region. What I want to bring out is, that I think in the case of Pakistan, it was a point that Professor Cohen knows perhaps very well, but my views are slightly different on that. I think Pakistan's not been made to feel the pain for all its activities which go against the international norms that the world is moving in the direction of. And Pakistan has the military in Pakistan, which is a monster and an establishment and an entity in its own right, and the largest political party in Pakistan, has two sources of support. Its own financial strength, which comes from the Fauji Foundation, where they make much more money in 1 year than America paid them over 5 years. And the second is the Chinese support that they continue to enjoy as an all-weather friend and ally. And therefore, America should rather invest in a country like India, which has ticked virtually all the boxes that an honest American diplomat would turn around and say, here's the country that I'm looking to do business with. And it's still, at the end of the day, we are still being told that, wait, your time will come, or you have a new president and we have an old prime minister, or vice versa. I think individuals will come and go. I think Modi has now shown that he's willing to move forward. He has also shown, please remember, considerable magnanimity in coming to America and not mentioning the fact that he was denied a visa all these years.
So,
you've got to give a man credit for that. He's moved beyond that. Let us move beyond the past. Let us look at a future in which we two democracies one day can dance together.
Just a quick point on that, and that is that, again, I remind everyone that the United States business community are the largest group of investors in India, bar none. And we want to continue to be that way. You mentioned commitment to India. GE has been there for 112 years. Citibank, 115 years. Abbott, 70 years. These are major commitments.
Sorry, they're not philanthropists.
Major investors. And so now the issue is, how do we create a business climate, a business environment that regenerates a complete enthusiasm back in India? And that's what we're trying to do.
Take back the immigration reform bill and all the things there which stop
the outplacement provision has to go, and I agree.
You agree with me on that?
The outplacement provision has to go.
You want our economy to open up to you, allow talented Indians to work, do business,
let's work on
build
tax clarity, let's work
allow
on
the
intellectual
entrepreneurial
property,
opportunities for
all
Indians.
Important issues.
Unleash India's entrepreneurial potential on your soil.
And that DNA has got to be very important.
You think it will come?
That's exactly what's going to happen. We've seen it in Gujarat. The chief minister of Gujarat, Narendra Modi, has dynamically developed the state, 3-time elected chief minister. He's now running the country. We're very confident that he's going to put these kinds of pro-business policies in place for all of India.
There is such an agenda, but I feel there is openness and there is potential. I spoke to a lot of Indians and they said, what are the critical hard issues for you? They said, we want technology transfers in defense, right? Don't give us the technology.
How much has changed in the technology transfer field in the past 20 years?
Well, I'm sure it has.
It's really
but not
quite
enough
astonishing.
For the Indians to be very happy.
But look, the Indians will never be completely happy. We will never be completely happy. That's life. You have great soaring ambitions.
Sikorsky.
So do we.
Okay. I want to know whether Mr. Seshadri Chari, we sort of left the conversation with him. He provoked everyone here, all of us. Not me though, or not Maroof, but he provoked some of you. And then I don't think we went back to him. Seshadri Chari, we're now about 6 minutes from Narendra Modi's speech at the Council for Foreign Relations. Anything you'd like to say to Professor Stephen Cohen, Ambassador Schaffer, on Ron Somers, all of whom responded to you? Very quickly, 2 minutes left to go. 2 minutes, Seshadri Chari only.
Let me clarify. My intention is not to provoke anybody, but I'm just making a point. And if this is going to be another provocation, let me tell you one thing. For the US, the policies are all compartmentalized. They can do business with China, they can do business with India, they can do business with Pakistan, but at the same time, their strategic interest vis-a-vis Pakistan, China, India can also be independently maintained. But as far as India is concerned, as far as the Asian region is concerned, we cannot segregate the strategic interest, the business interest, the political interest, and also our diplomatic and political interest separately. We will have to look at all this in a wholesome manner. If you look at all this in a wholesome manner, that is exactly where the problem starts. You know, we have a very serious problem. For the US, they can tell India not to deal with Burma, which they have done. And we have lost precious strategic area, scope, and elbow space in Burma to China. We have lost it in Sri Lanka. We have lost it in Pakistan. We have lost it in Afghanistan. We have lost it in Iran. So these things have taken place. So we cannot be doing business and strategic interest as a separate entities. We have to combine these two as far as our developmental issues are concerned. For the USA, it's very easy to tell, and it was the same Mr. Obama who said that China is the a natural leader of Asia, and the Asian pivot idea that he proposed. And now he will have to recalibrate India's policy. And please tell me, when was the last time the State Department spoke to India about their India policy vis-a-vis Pakistan policy? They have not discussed this at all. So I think these are some of the issues that we will have to sit across and talk. This is not a bilateral visit of Modi to Obama.
And one thing let me tell you. Okay, we've got the live feed from the CFR New York. I need to give my American participants an opportunity to respond to you, because otherwise we'll go into the speech if they choose to, of course. You know, why can't there be a straightforward conversation between India and America on the issue of Pakistan?
It will be.
I think we will be in favor of it.
Yeah, you'd be in favor of it?
Yes.
It will be, absolutely yes. But again, defining partnership of the 21st century, global partners, natural global partners, as Narendra Modi said yesterday, the bottom line is put some meat behind it now, and this is our chance.
Okay,
but,
Professor Cohen.
It's bizarre that an Indian would want us to rehyphenate India and Pakistan when after it happened.
No, I don't think he's saying rehyphenation. He's saying have a conversation on the problems emanating from Pakistan.
He's right. Chari's right. We've separated them in our policy, India policy, Pakistan policy.
But why is America squeamish about talking about Pakistan?
We do need to talk to India about Pakistan. I agree.
But is there an amount of squeamishness? Because it's a problem you created.
They're treated separately. Pakistan is seen as part of Afghanistan.
No, because if you look back historically, Professor Cohen, you have a deep understanding of the region. You know, America could have intervened in Pakistan a long time back.
But you want us to intervene in Pakistan. India should be intervening in Afghanistan. A larger role for India. That's, I think you're looking too small.
No, we don't provide military assistance to...
Well, that's part of the problem. India should resume the role it used to have many years ago.
Okay, so Professor Cohen, Maroof, now we are building up to CFR. Well, what is Modi going to say, which will be different or which will be an add-on, in your view, to what he said at Anga 2 days back?
Yeah, before I go to that, on just 2 quick points. One is that I think it always surprises me that Washington has perhaps the largest collection of think tanks anywhere in the world. But I think the terms of reference of thinking in think tanks are set out before the reports are written. So therefore, they end up taking a direction which then puts America not saying anything different that it's said in the last 5-10 years on a subject like Pakistan or China than what we would expect from America to come out. And I think the second thing is, and I brought that point out earlier, I think Indians are not aggressive enough to pitch for their own case. I think this is a serious shortcoming of our diplomatic community. We have one of the smallest diplomatic cadres for the size of our country. We have a smaller diplomatic corps than Singapore and New Zealand, and consider their population, consider India's population, and we still want to punch in the big league. I think there is a problem in South Bloc also. We must recognize that.
Yeah, but this is, I mean,
having said that, I think Mr. Modi is going to really...
Prices money for diplomats won't make America change their mind.
No, but I think we need to pitch in much better. You do a much better job.
Political leadership should be pitching in much better.
You do a much better job pitching in.
I was just going to say that Maroof had talked about the importance of our seriously understanding each other's interests, and I think that's what it really comes down to. I mean, you can't set conditions for what U.S. policy can be. We can't set conditions for what India's policy can be. But we do have to talk to each other, not just at each other.
We have to talk. But I think a significant conversation is now beginning. because there's a sustained interest in India's place in the world, and therefore, the sense I get and the sense that I can bring you when I come from India is that India wants its place among the global elite. It already is, and it must find its place. That as that happens, there needs to be a necessary, serious calibration of the relationship with America, and we need to take that risk. It may work out, it may not work out, but not to give it an opportunity.
It's worth the risk. Believe me,
will not be worth it. Ron,
100%. Jai Hind. I mean, in the end, it's going to happen today. Mr. Modi and Mr. Obama are going to talk. They're going to have an absolute discussion. Afghanistan is going to be central to that discussion. Business community has already had their moment this morning, and they'll have their moment tomorrow afternoon.
Obama साहब मोदी साहब का स्वागत करेंगे, बहुत खुशी से स्वागत करेंगे.
खुशी से करेंगे.
हाँ, बिल्कुल.
वो तो बहुत प्रॉब्लम्स में है आजकल. वो उनके इतने अपने इतने प्रॉब्लम. हाँ,
प्रॉब्लम्स तो होते ही हैं.
क्योंकि इतनी सरदर्द हो रही है उनको दूसरी चीजों से. But well said. I mean, I must appreciate. By the way, that comes from years of being in both Pakistan and India. People would welcome that. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for surprising our audience out there.
दोनों बातचीत के बाद क्या होगा? एक हफ्ते से, एक महीने से क्या बात है?
एक महीने से? पता नहीं क्या बात हो रही है.
Well, that's
मैं कुछ कहना चाहूँगा आपको.
That's the measure of this.
I would like to say something to you. आप पाकिस्तान के बारे में कुछ कीजिए और फिर पाकिस्तान के लोगों को समझाइए कि वो गलत कर रहे हैं, और शायद आपके पास वो पावर और इन्फ्लुएंस है पाकिस्तान पर कुछ दबाव डालने के लिए. दबाव means pressures. My Hindi is not good, but I hope I've communicated that to you from our studio. Ambassador, a quick word. I think I just would like an update, or you're talking about Modi followed him. What's going to be different?
I think what Mr. Modi is going to do is
give me 5 or 6 key points.
First is that he's going to really want to energize the business partnership and the trade relationship. I think defense areas we've moved forward primarily because India was desperate for new technology. Mr. Anthony, our last defense minister, took the shorter route of the FMS, which was a government-to-government deal, and it was easier for him and not to get into controversy. But I think India is wanting more DPP-related business, defense-related technology coming into. So there's that one area. Professor Cohen has made that point very well at the start of the debate. I think the second area is going to be, I think Modi should really offer even visiting visas for American businessmen to come to India, visa on arrival. I mean, why just restrict it to PIOs and OCIs and NRIs? I mean, the visa should be given to, they're coming for India's good. What's the problem? Those people who really, Hafiz Saeed and his gang never arrived in India with visas when they did what they did in 2011. So what are we talking about?
Simple point is, Professor Cohen, Ambassador Schaffer, and Ron Thomas, the point is that we would like to have a very strong relationship with you, but we would also, you want us to do a lot of things your way. We now, for the first time, are saying, we want the Americans to do a lot of things our way.
This is not the first time.
No, it's
not the first time.
It's in a strong way.
It is bilkul not the first time.
Arnab,
but it is a reasonable time, nevertheless, to make the point again.
Looking back,
because there's more business on the plate.
The visas the Chinese way.
Arnab, the one single area which we often don't talk about. There are these big ticket companies and the big firms which want to do business in India. But really the core of business, whether with the United States or even in the neighborhood, has to come from small and medium enterprises. You have to encourage more of them to do business, and that's where the boom is going to come from.
Absolutely. Seshadri Chari.
We'll talk about that the next time we get together.
Seshadri Chari. And by the way, Modi should be coming at CFR anytime. There's a quick run-up to that. I think he's running 4 or 5 minutes late already. Yes, please, Mr. Chari.
Yeah, Arnab, I don't want to end this discussion on a very serious note. So I just told one of the correspondents from the US newspapers very recently that Indo-US relationship is like a traditional Indian marriage. There are problems, there are ups and downs, but the divorce never comes.
That's a fair point.
But we're always on a barat. We're always on a barat last 10 years.
Yeah, and Professor Stephen Cohen says that India and America have been on a barat
for 10 years,
for the last 10 years.
That's a long
well, I feel here I feel here that in a way, the people of India, the government of India are confident enough and strong enough and resolute enough and sure enough of where they stand in the world to do business with America. Here is America's opportunity. America has to reach out as much, if not more. It has to step up to the plate if it wants to re-engage India, because it was America which chose more than 50 years back to start dealing with Pakistan, and look at the way Pakistan has turned out. Nobody wants to hyphenate the relationship, but look where India is, look where Pakistan is, look where the problems of the world are, and let's see what Modi says at the CFR speech. I'm going to take a very short break. This is live and continuing coverage from Washington. I'll be back on the other side. Ron Sommers, Ambassador Schaffer, Professor Cohen, and Maroof stays on, of course. Thank you very much for joining me on this very, very interesting panel. Viewers, don't go away. We'll be back with the live speech that Mr. Modi will make.